WIZZFX.
Hey, I'm Chris and welcome to another episode of Before the DAW. Still need a haircut. So this episode is going to be a little bit shorter, but I thought it worthwhile to highlight a few thoughts and ideas around selecting voiceovers. So we've personified our listener, right? We've mapped out their journey. We've thought about the production we might need and some of the messaging we want to use and kind of mapping all of that stuff out and starting to get a semblance for how our station is going to sound, albeit all on paper form or in our brains as we're sort of working through this, but we've kind of got an idea, right? But one of the things that I think is a critical mistake is when radio stations make decisions based on what they're hearing elsewhere. So, oh, I love this voice because so-and-so uses it, or such and such a station uses it. Or I love this voice personally. You know, those aren't necessarily the best ways to pick voiceovers. I think the best way to pick a voiceover for your station is to think about how that person fits into the life of your listener. So do they sound like your listener? Do they sound like they could be their friend? I feel like that's more important and is going to resonate more strongly than just another voice that has a really commanding presence. Now, don't get me wrong, I love a good voice with commanding presence. But again, I would be looking to select that commanding presence voiceover based on my listeners. You know, what kinds of voices might resonate with them. And you might have to do a bit of a focus group or get half a dozen people in a room that are within your target market and go, who do you like? What voice appeals to you? That might be a really worthwhile thing to do. In fact, I would recommend that. But certainly giving a little bit more consideration to the type of voice you want, I think is really important. Now, many stations that I have worked for and do work for often have a sort of a mix, right? They'll have like a fairly large presenting male voice or female voice, and then they'll have a more listener sounding male or female voice. And mixing those two is actually quite a nice sort of happy medium, shall we say, where you've got the opportunity to do big announcements and exciting moments and key things with your more voiceover voice, and then the VO that sounds more like a listener can do some of the lighter moments or the comedic things, or sort of help break up sort of the impact of a full-on voice. Because if you just use a full-on voice all the time, you lose all impact, right? Because everything is full on, and actually it can be nice to have the juxtaposition. So that can be a nice happy medium. Equally, of course, you could argue the same about having a voice that sounds more like your listeners, in that, well, then you've got no impact because you're never using a voice that really cuts through and has the gravitas that you're looking for. So certainly things to consider there, but definitely worth exploring and researching and testing out some ideas with some people in your core audience, just to make sure that you are choosing your voice to best complement the engagement that you're trying to see, which of course, in turn, as we talked about in episode 1, all of this stuff is going to impact your rating. So it's really critical. You can't just make a blanket decision and hope for the best. Doing this research will pay dividends. So when you go to pick your voices, or you're evaluating the voices that you have, really try and think about how they're going to resonate and how you're going to use them and what's important to your listener. Really short episode, as I said. Next time, we're going to talk about scripting. So I hope I'll see you then. In the meantime, if you have any questions, comments, or thoughts, feedback, feel free to get in touch. You can head over to WIZZFX.com and use the contact form there. Reach out on any of the socials, or you can email info@WIZZFX.com. Cheers.
Custom imaging, sound design, music, WIZZFX.